President Obasanjo liquidated the airline, and since then we've been waiting for benefits. But in 2015, when President Muhammadu Buhari came in, he promised to pay us, and today I'm happy that 5,996 members of ex-workers of Nigeria Ways are receiving their money. I'm also a beneficiary. The good thing about what President Buhari did is that he promised that the over 800 people that died in the process of waiting for this money, their next of kin will be paid. And as I'm talking to you, they have been paid.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of...
Council of Chiefs in Kogi State meet President Buhari.
APC presidential and vice presidential candidates in next month's elections answer questions on their agenda for Nigerians.
And Vice President Osinbajo urges Nigerians to carefully consider motives behind every agitation for restructuring.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we examine INEC's 2019 election guidelines, plus faith-based organizations and the forthcoming elections.
This week, precisely on Monday, the Independent National Electoral Commission, that's INEC, released guidelines for the conduct of elections in Nigeria.
Now, the new set of guidelines were added to those that were used for the 2015 elections. Henceforth, collection officers are no longer allowed to make or receive phone calls while on duty. And voters are also barred from taking cell phones or any photographic device into voting cubicles.
All right, and that's not all. The guidelines also provide special cues for people living with disabilities on election day. Of course, and this is the one of the most important things, accreditation and voting will take place simultaneously.
INEC says that these regulations will cover all elections, and reports already indicate that the move by INEC is receiving mixed reactions from Nigerians, especially the political parties.
Indeed, some actually say that the newly released guidelines will impact negatively on the electoral process, while, of course, others seem to be quite comfortable with the new guidelines. But that will be our first discussion on the program today. Kingsley.
All right. We shall also take a look at faith-based organizations at the forthcoming elections. Now, faith-based organizations command large followership and also wield a lot of influence over their members. But over time, there have been allegations of some of the organizations inciting their members and creating an unhealthy political climate in the country.
So the question will be, how should religious organizations or faith-based organizations exercise their influence over members and, of course, the society to ensure a peaceful electoral process, especially this next month, I beg your pardon. Now, of course, we'll be joining us here on Good Morning Nigeria to talk to us on this issue, panel of guests in today's program. This is Good Morning Nigeria, as always, reaching you from the largest network in Africa, that's the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA. I am Claire Adilabo Abdurazak. From wherever you're watching, we thank you for always staying with us. Kingsley.
All right, and I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Claire in also welcoming you to this edition of the program, in the course of which we shall have our complimentary segments. And these are newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and others. In the meantime, let's take the news highlights with our other colleague, Anne Jibuno. Hi, Jibuno.
Hello, Kingsley and Claire. Good morning, Nigeria. Here's the news. President Muhammadu Buhari says his administration's commitment to the three cardinal agenda of fighting corruption, insecurity, and reviving the economy is a solid foundation for social development that require the commitment of well-meaning Nigerians in building a better future of the nation, for the nation and her citizenry. This was while appearing as a guest on the program, The Candidates, which provided a unique platform for direct interaction between the President and Vice President Yemi Osinbajo as candidates of the governing All Progressives Congress with the public ahead of the 2019 polls.
We want to remind Nigerians to see when we started, 2015, where we are now, what we have been able to do in between this time of 3.5 years with the resources and the time available to us.
When people are poor, they remain poor unless the government does something about it. Nothing was done despite the highest revenues in our history. In 3 years of our own government, 3 years, 94 billion is what we made from oil revenues. Compare that to 383 billion.
Traditional rulers in the country have been tasked to properly guide their subjects towards ensuring that genuine efforts at securing the country, diversifying the economy, and safeguarding public assets for sustainable growth and development are not undermined. President Muhammadu Buhari threw the challenge at a meeting with the President and prominent members of the Kogi State Council of Chiefs in Lokoja.
We have a great country, you know it. We have resources. What we should continue to pray and actively participate is to get responsible leadership at all levels so that we can realize the strength of our country.
I want to assure you that Kogi State is going to be 100% delivered to APC at all levels. Really welcome.
Meanwhile, President Buhari is advising Nigerians to be aware of the antics and deceptive character of the opposition People's Democratic Party, warning that allowing its candidates to return to power will spell doom for Nigeria. This was while leading the APC Presidential Campaign Council to a campaign rally in Lokoja, the Kogi State capital.
They said they spent $16 billion, not naira, on power. Why is the power? I am warning you, don't make any mistake of choosing any PDP candidate. What they will try to do is to cover the theft they have committed against the nation. I assure you, I will follow the system. Anybody that was found responsible, we will get him, take away the money from him, put it in the treasury.
Still staying with politics, the People's Democratic Party has continued its nationwide campaign ahead of the February 16th presidential election with a promise to further improve the economy if victorious at the polls. This was at a campaign rally in Osogbo, Osun State.
I'm going to get the youth 40% of my government, I mean it. I said I'm going to give women 30%, I mean it.
Away from politics now, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo says so much could be achieved using the national constitution in restructuring the country, but warns Nigerians to be vigilant of who is making the calls for restructuring. The Vice President was speaking at a colloquium in Ibadan to mark the 80th birthday of APC chieftain Bisi Akande.
As a region, if we're looking at restructuring and all that, we need to sit down and look at how to approach it from the point of view of the court systems. The only way that has succeeded so far is what was done in Lagos under the leadership of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. That is going ahead to ensure that in the courts of law, using the same constitution that we have today, we can actually get a lot done.
Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kingsley after this break.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem promptly through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
Brought us as usual.
As usual. You have no problem. You're welcome, sir.
As usual, yeah?
Welcome.
You take that one.
You take that one.
You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have? You don't have?
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice. Are you sorry? That's not the Nigerian rice we are talking about. Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food. I'm going to bring Mrs. Mobu to come to chocolate rice of made in Nigeria here. And see how it are made.
Correct.
And how they are cook it.
Correct.
Homegrown rice are good for your health. It boosts our economy and give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Why don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. Really? And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's time now for us to take some business stories. With the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, PEBEC, enumerating next steps to move Nigeria into the top 100 on the 2020 World Bank Doing Business Index. Details of the story with our correspondent, Comfort Amodu.
As Nigeria counts down to the general elections, the Office of the Accountant General is telling those responsible for issuing information on the nation's public finance system to be factual, so as to avoid misleading the citizens and overheating the polity.
And not only during the year of elections, but at all times. But it becomes more important in a year of elections. Because, as you know, politicians will always want to take advantage of any story that may be disadvantageous. Therefore, it is much more important at this time around to be sure of what you are reporting.
And the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation for the month of December, increased higher than the rate in November 2018 by 0.16%. This was disclosed by the National Bureau of Statistics this Wednesday. Inflation increased 11.44% year-on-year in December 2018 from the 11.28% recorded in November. On month-on-month basis, the headline index increased by 0.74% in December 2018, up by 0.06% from the rate recorded in November 2018. The urban inflation rate increased by 11.73% year-on-year in December 2018 from 11.61% recorded in November 2018. On a month-on-month basis, the urban index rose by 0.7% in December 2018, down by 0.07 from 0.83% recorded in November. The rural inflation rate increased by 11.18% in December 2018, from 10.99% in November 2018, down by 0.06% from the rate recorded in November 2018, which was 0.78%. Uche Uwaleke, professor of stock market in Nigeria, explains the rise in the inflation figures.
Cost of goods and services increased in December year-on-year relative to November. You recall that in November it was 11.28%. Part of why we have increase in the cost of goods and services is more because of increase in the cost of power and increase in the cost of transport, and so on. And with the government investment in these areas, okay, especially with the attention the transport sector is now receiving, particularly the rail sector. So I expect by the time government, invests more in these areas, the rate of inflation will begin to go down. I also think we have enough reserves for now, to be able to, defend the naira and ensure that exchange rate does not, go up. Because when you have increase in exchange rate, it fits into inflation.
Next is closing figures of Nigerian Stock Exchange on Wednesday, 16th January 2018. With Business News, I'm Comfort Amadou.
All right, many thanks, Comfort, for that business package. And coming up next will be newspaper review. Don't go away.
All right, newspaper reviewer Bayo Atoebe is right here with us in the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kingsley.
Good morning. There are stories.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay. There are stories that are common to the front pages of the papers that we have this morning. We have politics. We also have the planned arraignment of the incumbent Chief Justice of Nigeria. Let's begin with that story, and it's the lead for the Punch. It says NBA and SANS kick as federal government orders freezing of CJN's bank accounts. That's on page 2 in greater detail. That story is also the lead for the Nigerian pilot. It says federal government insists on Onogan's trial with 4 riders as CCB, that's the Code of Conduct Bureau, directly serves criminal charges on him and directs NFIU to freeze his bank accounts as a financial intelligence unit. And why NJC cannot determine his case first, that's according to Professor Sage, himself is a senior advocate. And Buhari didn't know about CJN's arraignment. That's attributed to Oshibajo, vice president. For Daily Sun, it's the lead story as well. And it comes with a double-decker headline and 3 riders. Federal government moves to freeze CJN's bank accounts, writes NFIU on domiciliary and local accounts. We are not aware, says Onogan. And AGF, that stands for the Attorney General of the Federation, keeps mum. Details of the story can be found on page 6. Also there on the front page of the Daily Sun is a story how Buhari knew about Onogan's case, according to Oshibajo, with the writer indicating that the CCT has served a notice of trial on the Chief Justice.
Okay. Now, the same story, of course, is trending on the front page of the Daily Independent. I will read the headline. I'll just read some of the reactions captured by that paper, quite a number of them. The first one is from the Vice President, and it says, it's regrettable he has to face trial. And then you have another one, nobody can get justice against CJN at NJC. That's coming from Sage. And CUPP says it has recording of plot against CJN. And that's, again, how the Daily Independent captured that. Daily Trust has the same story, just a little below the nameplates, and it says, assets, AGF asks NFIU to freeze CJN's bank accounts. There are other stories, but first let's return to Bayo to speak to this issue, Bayo.
Yes, thank you, Claire. Actually, the Office of the Attorney General is said to have directed the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit to freeze the account of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. There's no confirmation from the Office of the Attorney General because it is reported that he has kept money. Meanwhile, some newspapers are reporting that the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Walter Onoge, has personally received the summons of the papers of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, and he has personally signed the paper on Monday. Daily Trust report that he personally appended his signature. He said there is a substituting trial by the Federal High Court in Abuja on looking at an ex parte motion for January 17th. Meanwhile, the Code of Conduct Tribunal has joined his own case to hear the case as well as the challenge that it has no jurisdiction on January 29th. But the issue is developing, and the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, says that President Muhammadu Buhari only heard about the arraignment of Chief Justice of Nigeria only on Saturday evening. Professor Osinbajo says the President believes in public institutions working independently without any overhang from anywhere. He described as very sad the development that has led to the arraignment of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. He also says that the Code of Conduct Bureau has a new chairman who was recently appointed. And it was in his capacity of pursuing the process of a petition before him that has led to where we are. But in the public domain, there have been arguments. Well, the legality of it we cannot talk about because it's sub judice, but the procedure has been a matter of challenge. And like every issue, there are two sides of it, like a coin. One is that the court, there's a precedent already, and that precedent is that in the case of Njagiwa, Nigeria Judicial Council is the first point of call for issues regarding the misconduct of judicial officers. On the other side, they say that when it comes to the issue of assets declaration, jurisdiction is, as provided for in the Constitution, is exclusive to the Code of Conduct Tribunal. And in fact, if you go to section 292(1)(a), it provides the grounds for which a judicial officer shall be removed. One is infirmity of mind and body. The second is misconduct, which Kingsley, you referred to the other day. The third there is contravention of the Code of Conduct. So some of them are saying in the public domain that that Code of Conduct is exclusive to the Code of Conduct Tribunal. And in fact, they cite a precedent that there was a ruling in 2013 for which the Honorable Chief Justice of Nigeria was a party in giving that ruling, and others were Bata, Ogunbiyi, and Akas. And the ruling was that when it comes to case of Code of Conduct, the jurisdiction is exclusively that of the Code of Conduct Tribunal. But again, every issue has two sides. When the Vice President says that the President did not know, the former Vice President, Atiku Abubakar, says that in one breath, if the President says he did not know, it means that the cabal is the one that is in charge of government. On the other hand, he says that if they also say that they don't know, then the coincidence that the petitioner was a former aide of Mr. President cannot be swept away. The person who petitioned is Dennis Akanya, and he's said to be a former aide of the president. Two other issues, again, about the double side of the coin. They say that one is, why do you open the court case now when it's close to election? And the others are arguing that there's no case, no time limit when to file a charge against a case. The other one is, why trial the number 5 citizens? And they say the symbol of justice in Nigeria is a lady in blindfold with a sword and a scale. That justice is blind. So those are the arguments in the public domain.
Except
but the courts will determine the legality.
All right, Bayo, let's go ahead. I'll take other stories from the papers. I've already expressed my opinions on this at the initial stage, so let's see how the matters unfold. Above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, you have the following headlines. NNPC is a mafia organization. I'll privatize it. That's according to Atiku. Details of the story on page 25. Acting IJ blames rot in NPF, that's Nigeria Police Force, on weak leadership. Inflation rate hits 11.44%, and ex-Air Force Chief, that's Amosu, forfeits 2.2 billion naira to federal government. And 2 earpieces there. Go to court, Oshibajo tells restructuring advocates, page 7. And don't abandon legislative duties for elections, Saraki begs senators. And right at the foot of the front page, you have 3 other headlines there. Boko Haram sponsored by forces outside Nigeria. It's according to President Buhari. Fountain University probes Dawn, that's a lecturer, for attacking student who refused to cut grass. That's on pages 4 and 5. And police portal closes as well. Over 315,000 apply for 10,000 vacancies.
Quite some interesting stories you've read, Kingsley, especially the one coming from the Senate President and the last one. But let's quickly gloss over some of the other trending stories. Just on top, the nameplate of Daily Independent, 2019, US, EU, UK, France, Germany insist on free, fair pools. Now, restructuring Osinbajo, others advocate stronger autonomous states, and Atiku Abubakar insists on selling mafia, that's in quote, NNPC if he wins. Quickly to the Daily Trust. The bold headline on Daily Trust is election. Defeat seems impossible, attributed to President Buhari, and that was, of course, during the 2-hour town hall program tagged the candidates yesterday. And just beneath that, Kenyan school girls receive African of the Year award. That's, of course, coming from Daily Trust. There are other stories trending at the bottom of the paper. Kingsley read this other one. Ex-Air Chief Amosu forfeits 2.2 billion naira to FG. 2019 polls, security a major concern, US and others. And, of course, that story from Atiku Abubakar trending on page 6. Quickly, Bayo, let's quickly do a little...
Two stories about the economy. The Nigeria Bureau of Statistics says that inflation has increased from 11.28% to 11.44%. The increase was specifically within the urban areas, because the report indicated that urban inflation increased to 11.73%, while the rural inflation was 11.18%. The inflation was attributed to increase in the prices of consumables, particularly during the Christmas period. The other story is from the leadership, and it talks about a report that Nigeria petrol is among 10 of the cheapest in the world. This is revealed in the Global Economic Policy Initiative report released on Tuesday. It says that the reports that the oil price increase continually to lead the economies of the world. And it says that the pump price stability in Nigeria has been attained for at least a short while now. Zimbabwe has one of the worst pump prices, 240% increase now compared to Nigeria naira, 1,204. Nigeria is 6th in the world, according to Bloomberg. So there are two stories now. One says Nigeria is 10th cheapest, another says 6th cheapest in the world.
All right, Bayo, that argument has been on, I'm sure you know that, for almost 30 years or more now. We were talking about the pump price of petrol and all the indices that are used. How much local refining do we do? And if you compare it, then you bring down all the indices. Let's get it. There's a story, a human interest story, and I'm sure you must have picked it. We will not have time to discuss it today, Bayo, because we are pressed for time. And it's coming from the Nigerian Pilot, right at the foot of the front page of the Nigerian Pilot. It says, NHRC. NHRC stands for the National Human Rights Commission. Writes Dankwambo over staff death. There's a story. Governor Dankwambo, of course, is the governor of Gombe State, and his cook at his private residence in Kaduna was arrested along with other domestic staff on allegations that there had been a burglary on the property, and some television sets were missing. Now, he was one of those taken in by SARS. That's the federal SARS, the cook. Unfortunately, the allegation is that he died in their custody on their way to the hospital. And there's an autopsy report that has been submitted. So there's a hearing going on now by the National Human Rights Commission, and there's a story that has been abroad. Bayo, maybe we'll take time to discuss this some other time as the matters unfold. Thank you. Thank you for being with us today. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria. Let's take a short break. Now, when we return, don't forget we have a double-decker discussion this morning, both on elections, ANE guidelines, and the role of faith-based organizations.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You are here already?
No. Now my spirit there. My body there for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m.
and start asking me jam questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Fake news which is shared for malicious purposes is a danger to our peace and security in Nigeria. Misinformation as fake news is a serious threat to our hard-earned democracy and promotes hatred and misunderstanding between our communities. We are all responsible for stopping the spread of fake news in its tracks. So, always check the source and credibility of any news item. Say no to fake news. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, broadcasting live from NTA, Africa's largest TV network. Now, let me start by asking you, do you know your guidelines as a voter? Do you know what you're supposed to do? Well, don't answer me. The conversation on election guidelines starts right now, and we're beginning with the background by Mayor Ogidi.
Monday, 14th of January 2019, INEC released a 33-page document containing 52 guidelines on how the elections in 2019 shall be conducted. 4 additional guidelines were added to the existing document, that is, the one that was used in 2015. The additions were 1. Collation officers are not allowed to receive telephone call while on duty. 2. Special queues shall be provided for people living with disability. 3. Voters are not allowed to go to the voting cubicle with telephones or any photographic device. And finally, accreditation and voting shall take place simultaneously between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. This has, however, generated some reaction from party chieftains and electorates.
The idea of registering, go house and come back and vote is a wasting of time. At the time you register immediately and vote immediately is okay. That is to save enough time and to reduce the work of the INEC official.
Creating a special lane for disabled is also a good idea.
It's a welcome development. We have gone through it.
On assumption of office, the chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, came up with 14-point agenda for the 2019 elections. With the publication of the guidelines for the elections, the 10th point of the agenda has been completed, meaning 4 left. 1. The final list of candidates for the election shall be published on the 17th of January 2019, followed by nomination of agents by the political parties. Thirdly, conduct of presidential and National Assembly elections. And finally, the conduct of governorship, state houses of assembly, and the FCT elections.
Thank you, Mayor Ogidi, for that background. Joining us in the studios now to elaborate on these guidelines and matters arising therefrom. Let's welcome Mr. Oluwole Osaze-Ozie, who is Director of Voter Education at the Independent National Electoral Commission. Mr. Osaze-Ozie, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning.
Okay. And
of course, Samson Itodo is also here with us. He's a familiar face. But he's Executive Director, Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement, IAGA Africa, but synonymous with, of course, the Not Too Young to Run bill. Thank you for joining us on Good Morning.
Always a pleasure. Good morning.
All right.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin. I mean, Osazozi, you listen to our background report. First, I'm sure there are some other hidden, not hidden, let me not say hidden because it's been published. There are additional details, you know, with regard to the guidelines of the Independent National Electoral Commission for this year's elections. What are the significant differences between what we used 4 years ago and what is now on the table for the 2019 elections?
Thank you. If you ask me, I don't think there are any, what you might term, significant differences. There are some differences because guidelines like laws are organic. They change according to the circumstances, according to the challenges you meet in the field, always trying to improve things. The Constitution is the framework followed by the Electoral Act, but the details in lawmaking are those as contained in the guidelines. People often dwell, and I think Mayor Gideon in his report mentioned the issue of what is termed simultaneous accreditation and voting, which we call continuous accreditation and voting. People make heavy weather out of it. Some people have made heavy weather out of it, but really it's not a significant difference because, yes, in the 2015 guidelines it was there, but guidelines are organic, as I said, and the guidelines have evolved since 2015. So that is not a new thing. It's a thing that was introduced, if I'm not mistaken, in December 2017 after the Bayelsa main election. It was still vote, credits, go home and come back to vote. But by this supplementary election, I think it was December 2015, it had now changed. And based on calls by the electorate, by CSOs, by political parties then, and everybody welcomed it because I think several of the reports talked about 2 million people, just a shade over 2 million, who got accredited but did not come back to vote at the 2015 elections. So based on that, the groundswell, I think it was basically unanimous that it is better to just go right ahead, which takes us back to the prior to 2011 time. People tend to forget that that is actually what the regime was up to 2011. It was in 2011, with the 2011 general elections, that we now split it and say, let it not be simultaneous, let there be a break, because there were complaints of so many people not so many, but a few people with several voters' cards, and they could vote and often migrated from one polling unit after voting, going there and say, okay, let us do it in such a way that everybody votes at the same time. That will check that particular malpractice. But with the improvement in the card reader, with the improvement in register, that is now more or less a thing of the past. So we now examined those things and went back to the previous time. So it was only in 2011 and 2015 that that was actually used. So yes, it is different from 2015 in that regards, but it's not different from what operated prior to 2011 and what has happened post 2015. It doesn't happen.
Okay, I'd like you to, yes, we can understand the second, of course, new inclusion. That's the provision for, the physically challenged. But could you give us more insight, especially into the use of phones by collation officers, and of course the voter, not allowed to, use photographic devices. Where does that leave pressmen, for instance?
Well, if a pressman decides to be a voter and enters the cubicle, he cannot enter the cubicle with his camera or with his phone. He's not allowed by law to compromise the secrecy of the ballot either. So technically, he's allowed to go into the polling unit, which is the area, but the polling cubicle is where you go to cast your vote within the polling unit, the polling area. So you can be there, but you are not allowed to reflect in any way or take a memory, take a camera and take a photograph of how a person has voted.
If a collation officer, for instance, is in a kind of difficulty or is having some challenges without the use of the phone, the mobile phone, how does he communicate? How does he get his issues across to probably those who will provide solutions?
Let's draw a distinction between two issues here. One, you're not allowed to use the camera in the polling unit. Now you're talking about collation, which is the next level. Yes. He's not allowed to use his phone. We're in the process of collation because he's at work. He's on duty. A pilot, I don't think, can use his phone while he's flying the plane. So at certain times, he's not allowed to use. If there's a break in collation and he's no longer in the process of collating, fair enough. But while he's collating results, you should concentrate on your job. And why did that come about? Recall that people made heavy weather of the fact that I think one of the returning officers in the recent governorship election either received a call or made a call. And the perception was that he was taking instructions from God knows who. That has nothing to do with the man's integrity. I'm sure it was an innocent call and everything else, but people read meanings into that and thought that his final decision was influenced by that phone call he received or made, which was a bit unfair, but that's the perception.
Do you think this is a well thought out, decision, or was INEC, pressurized by certain developments in the past?
No, I don't think we're pressurized. I don't think pressurized is the right word. Yes, I do think it was well thought out, because this is a product of not only people within the Commission, but in consultation with relevant stakeholders, CSOs, political parties, media executives, and others who have an interest in the process. Perception, unfortunately, seems to take a much bigger role in minds of people than reality or than facts. So in anything you can do to disabuse people's minds that anything untoward is happening, it's welcome. Yes, it was well thought out. In the process of collation, everybody, all eyes on him and things like that. Let him concentrate on the addition of the figures, making administrative decisions on which votes to accept, which votes not to accept, listening to disputes arising and resolving those ones administratively while he's on that duty. There should be no distractions for him or her. That's the purpose of that provision.
All right, so let's pause here and bring in Sam Itodo. Sam, obviously you're familiar with the guidelines now that were released just about 4 days ago. Let's have your take on the new or revised guidelines for the 2019 elections.
Well, thanks. First, there are about 5 things that we need to keep at the back of our minds as we look at these guidelines. And these are what you call the principles of credible elections, particularly in designing legal frameworks that govern elections. First is, does this guideline comply with the extant legal framework like the Constitution and the Electoral Act? To the best of my knowledge and review of all the 52 clauses in the revised guidelines, these guidelines are in conformity with the provisions of the Constitution as well as the provisions of the Electoral Act. And so if you're looking at compliance with the laws, because the guidelines is a derivative of the legal framework, so INEC cannot issue guidelines that runs contrary to the Constitution and the Electoral Act. The second is, when you talk about elections, there is uncertainty in the outcome of an election. However, the rules that govern the election must be clear and unambiguous. So if you look at the 52 clauses within the electoral guidelines, is there clarity? Are there clauses within these current guidelines that are ambiguous and confusing? I would say, to a large extent, the concerns that was expressed by different stakeholders when the first draft was shared, this is an improvement from the first draft. And so clauses have been clarified, they've also been expanded, and stakeholders know exactly what the rules are, because the rules must be certain and they must be clear for the conduct of elections. The third is about openness and transparency. How does this guideline, guarantee the credibility or the integrity of the elections? And to a large extent, there are certain innovations within these guidelines that guarantee transparency and openness, but there are still some gaps that exist, and also talk about those gaps. The fourth is, how responsive is these guidelines to the prevailing or emerging challenges and gaps within our electoral process? We talk about vote buying, for instance. How does this guideline respond to the menace of vote buying? So INEC has reconfigured polling units, the ban of the use of phones in polling, in voting cubicles. Those are some innovations that the Commission introduced. The fourth is about inclusion. And you can see from the guidelines that the INEC has made intentional steps in ensuring that persons with disability have their rights actually protected, and the process is made seamless for them to participate. But some gaps still exist. And before I even talk about the gaps, is to look at what are the innovations in these particular guidelines. First, this guideline seeks to reduce the incidence of inconclusive elections. So unlike the 2015 guidelines, about 10 scenarios were designed to respond to incidents that could lead to inconclusive elections. And this deals with the management of the margin of lead principle. So it is very, very clear. And I think that's a very commendable effort by the Electoral Commission to clearly spell out what are those scenarios. If there is obstruction or resistance from voters or communities to prevent INEC from deploying for elections, INEC would record 0 votes. If on the day of elections, voters in a community decide to intimidate polling officials and stop them from using card readers for accreditation, INEC is going to record 0 votes. In a situation where voting or collation of results is disrupted and then result sheets are damaged, collation officers can regenerate results from the duplicate copies. These are very fantastic innovations and are very, very clear. So we can reduce the incidence of inconclusive elections. The other point was about runoff. So we've got a constitution amendment that has increased the timeline for conducting runoff elections from 7 days to 21 days by virtue of the amendment to section 134, as well as 179 of the Constitution. And that has been reflected in the guidelines. But there are some concerns. And the first is about the openness and transparency of the results collation process. In the 2015 guidelines, it was very, very clear that at the end of collation, not just at the polling unit level, but at the local government, at the senatorial district, as well as the state, at the different levels. So the Form E60E form, which contains the results, the notice of results of polls, it's summarized and posted at the local government. It's there in the 2015 guidelines. And it was even applied in the Osun elections, because what we will have in 2019 in these forthcoming elections is at the polling unit, yes, the Form E60E form for posting results at the polling unit will be posted at the polling unit. When you move collation to the local government or the ward, let's even start with the local government, down to the state, the summary of results is not posted at the collation center. And we think it actually reduces the openness and transparency of the collation process. Because at the end of the day, even after you give party agents the result sheets, the people are unable to know who has actually won, except a declaration is made. And we think that it is important that at the different levels of collation, after collation, a summary of the results should be posted at the collation center so people can actually see, because what people will probably have access to is just polling unit results and then as well as party agents.
What's the attitude to this gap that you've just,
Well,
Mr.
Uzi,
what has it before he responds?
No,
yes.
No, because it was contained in the guidelines for 2015, and up till the Osun elections. If you recall, this is my understanding that there was an incident in Osun, and being a student of law and looking at what's the rationale for not including this in the guidelines, and I stand to be corrected, is the development in Aedade local government in Osun, when the summary result for that particular local government was posted, but there was computational inaccuracy. It wasn't as though that that particular local government, the collation officer or the returning officer manipulated the result. No, it was just computational inaccuracy. And so the mistake was reflected on that form. And if you see what happened in Osun, where they asked the, I think, is it the collation officer or the one of the staff of INEC to go and remove that particular form and ensure that the corrected results were posted, and it caused a lot of hoopla. And I think it's drawn from that. The commission, I want to believe, is trying to manage that. But again, you also need to look at how do you ensure the openness and transparency of the results collation process, because the weakest link for our elections is the results collation process. And so people should have access to results.
All right, Samson Itodo, thank you very much. Sazaozi, that's the one issue on the table for you to respond to now, namely the result collation and how it should be posted beyond the PUs, that's to say the polling units.
Well, Samson's quite right, and his analysis is spot on, actually, and especially in the overview of the guidelines. I quite honestly cannot respond directly to what he has said about the collation process, but the only thing I can say is that results are published in the polling unit, as what we call the people's results, and everybody is free to, has access to it. It's a public thing, and also the end result is also published, which is the final collation, final result. That is published by law and by the guidelines. So often in the past, where there have been computational errors that has led to a miscarriage in the sense that A probably won and B is returned as the winner by the commission, that has been corrected. A case in point is Nigerian Obi, where the tribunal itself now added up the results as presented by Peter Obi and declared him winner of the election and said, Inek, you were wrong in declaring Ngige as the governor of Anambra. It was actually a tribunal. So everybody, the tribunal, security, anybody, the CSOs, everybody monitoring the process, and all parties and candidates these days have situation rooms themselves. They get copies of these results, given them to by INEC. They also take photographs of the result at the polling unit and do their collation. So if there's any error at that stage of the final collation, you point out these errors, if you know of it, to the returning officer, and he, by law, has the final say what to admit, what not to admit. The polling unit results are the foundation of everything that you do. They are the very building blocks of the final results. Regardless of whatever shortcomings there might be in the collation process, that can be corrected in the final collation terminal point.
Is there any restriction on agency in the course of collation? In other words, you have party agents at the polling units. Yes. Would there also be party agents at the collation center for the ward, for the local government, for the senatorial district, and then at the state level?
Yes, there will be. In fact, there has always been. And right from the process of the distribution of sensitive materials, you have accredited party agents, you have accredited media, and accredited CSOs. Right from when we take the things from the vaults of the central bank to the INEC offices, to the RAC centers, the election area centers where they camp overnight, to the polling units, to each level of collation, there will always, and there are always those that are accredited, it's always open to them.
Yes. Gentlemen, one critical document that we haven't mentioned, I mean, it's not part of the fulcrum of our conversation this morning, has to do with the manual for electoral officers. That's also part of the critical document. The manual for election officers, the guidelines, the Electoral Act, and then the Constitution. These are all important. But one critical issue that is again on the burner for public discourse has to do with the PVC and the discretion that the polling officers would have. You say, look, you come in there, your PVC, your card reader, your name is on the register, it's not on the register, your face doesn't match it, your thumbprint is not red, and so on and so forth. What discretion can be exercised? Some persons are arguing that the mischief that the PVC and smart card reader were intended to cure would appear to give a lot of latitude to the polling officers. Sam Etodo, what are your thoughts?
I think it's important to appreciate the fact that elections is a human activity. And because we've got an election that is largely managed by human beings, and human beings are not robots, and they are not machines, they are also subject to making mistakes. I think it needs to be acknowledged. I'm recognizing that vigilance is very, very key in ensuring the sanctity of the electoral process. You can't conduct an election without conferring presiding officers with some measure of power and discretion. But in exercise of that discretion, they must also be mindful of what the guidelines actually say. And that's why the guidelines and the manuals and the Constitution are actually guiding documents.
Okay, we have we have to fast forward, sorry, because we really don't have, we have two issues to discuss.
Yeah, I'm sorry, let him
just land.
So on the issue about PVCs, the guidelines is very, very clear that first, the procedure for accreditation. You come with your PVC, it verifies your PVC and then fingerprints. The guidelines is clear. If the card reader, in fact, it is clear that you must, whether you like it or not, use the card reader machines for accreditation. And where you don't use card readers for accreditation, that election in that particular polling unit is null and void. So we must recognize that. And so presiding officers are bound to actually use the card reader. In fact, it is clearly stated in the guidelines that if, and also the code of conduct for officers, if you don't comply, it means it's insubordination and it's dereliction of duty, which is an offense. And so when you verify fingerprints, verify PVCs and then the fingerprints fail to be authenticated by the card reader, there's a procedure. On the voters register, there's a column where the voter whose fingerprint was not authenticated can thumbprint, and then you capture their phone, their phone numbers. In cases where PVCs are not read, the guidelines are clear that the presiding officer will ask the voter to leave the polling station. So if your name is not on the register, there is no point even showing up on the election day. If the PVC does not, if the card reader does not read your PVC, you will not be able to vote. So there are only two categories of people who will be able, three actually. First, if your PVC is read and your fingerprints are authenticated. If your PVC is read and your fingerprint is not authenticated, but your name is on the voters register, you can. And then the third scenario is if your PVC is read and your name is on the voters register, but due to technological issues, another image or the details of another voter comes up with the card reader.
Samson, sorry, quickly, we've got some tweets, but Mr. Saize, do voters really understand the simultaneous accreditation and voting, that you've adopted now? I mean, what they're used to is, you queue, you accredit, you go and wait, and then you come back and vote.
I'm going to disagree. I said so earlier in my presentation that, look, the change came in 2011. So it's only between 2011 and 2015 that break of you accredit, you go back home and go, only for those years. Okay. So most people are more familiar, actually, with this one. You go there, you accredit, and you vote right from pre-independence elections on to independent elections to 64, to 79, to 83. It's always been get there, accredit, vote, and you go home. And as your respondent said, I think most Nigerians, most citizens, I haven't heard any citizens apart from a few political parties who've said that's not a better system. And that's international best practice as well.
All right, international best practice. Thank you, Osaze. Let's quickly take our tweets. And the first one comes from Mike Anyakwo. Mike says, INEC guidelines for next month's elections undoubtedly came out very late. There have been condemnation and discordant tunes by some individuals and parties, but what is most important now is for all stakeholders to support INEC since time is of essence. We need free and fair elections.
Law Alpha C tweets, now, by releasing the guidelines, although untimely, it is left for the political parties and civil society organizations to educate voters. INEC is not really effectively utilizing the media for dissemination of important information. Now, they rely on parties, but thanks and kudos should be accorded. Kudos and thanks are the same thing, actually. Kudos should be accorded to the NTA for standing in the gap for INEC in information dissemination and for carrying the people along. All
right, this is a rather long one from Festus Akinboyewa. Just quickly do a little summary of it. First of all, he says that the guidelines for 2019 is under intense scrutiny and INEC should take all complaints seriously. Now, the guidelines have been carefully crafted. That's what he says. INEC should remain focused since not all contenders will be satisfied with the guidelines. All parties should embrace continuous voting and accreditation. It saves time when compared with separate accreditation and voting system. Finally, while INEC is trying not to disenfranchise any voter, anyone whose name is not on voters' register should not be allowed to vote.
That's clearly stated. Dele Jack Solomon continues from where that tweet left off. So it's pertinent for INEC to note that separate accreditation and voting may cause voter apathy during the election, as it did in 2015, because of the inconvenience it cost voters. We must remember from the 2015 experience that over 2.3 million people showed apathy, not necessarily 2.3 million. That's apathy. That's those who were accredited and didn't return to the polling units to cast their votes. Apathy, of course, includes those who didn't even just show up for accreditation in the first instance.
I think Dele has
there's another one, but I think it's important that we thank the guests. Well, Dele Jack Solomon here, it says security agencies should be mobilized to provide security for the forthcoming election, and to note that the electoral regulations and guidelines have affirmed the right of voters to remain within the vicinity of the polling unit after voting, and must allow voters to remain within such vicinity. That's to say, defend your votes. That's part of the guidelines that have been indicated. Defend not means that you should go and carry cudgels and then firing shots into the air.
All right,
I'm sure that we have the opportunity, that just we're barely 4 weeks to the elections, we'll have the opportunity of returning to the issues of the elections once again. On that note, we'd like to thank the ANEC Director of Voter Education, Oluwole Osaze-Ozi. Thank you for being with us in Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you for having me.
Also, we'd like to thank the Executive Director of IAGA Africa, Sam Itodo. Thanks a lot for being around.
Always a pleasure to be.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing elections still, this time the role of faith-based organizations.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA. Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The Nigerian Television Authority News 24 channel, your dependable all-round news station, offering you world-class news programs, documentaries, spotlights, promos, and information highlights. Take advantage of our network reach and advertise your interest, goods, and services with us. NTA News 24, first among equals with digital broadcasting. You can reach us on Channel 21 Terrestrial TV and Channel 101 on the Star Times platform. For more inquiries, please call Henry on 0803 379 0884. Join us today.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Right, this is the network service of the NTA, and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. If you've just joined us, you're right on time for our second part of our discussion, and it's also based on elections. But this time we're looking at faith-based organizations and their roles in Nigeria's elections. Let's take this report by Victor Azu to set the ball rolling.
It is now only a matter of weeks before Nigeria goes to the polls to elect leaders and representatives at the federal and state levels. In preparation, the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) has been working hard to ensure a successful elections. However, as always, they require the support of many different groups and individuals in different ways to pull through. One of such groups, albeit not often stated, is the religious organizations. This is because they command a large followership and wield a lot of influence over them. Their sermons have a way of resonating with their members as they are seen as representatives of God. But over time, some have been accused of inciting their members and creating an unhealthy political climate in the country. The question, however, is, how should religious organizations exercise their influence over members and indeed the society to ensure a peaceful and smooth electoral process? Should they preach peace or inflame passions ahead of the elections? That is the focus of our next discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Victor Azu, for that background. We have guests with us in the studios to discuss this issue in fuller detail. First, we'd like to welcome Methodist Bishop Sunday Onuoha, who is co-chair of the Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace. Bishop Onuoha, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here. And good morning, viewers.
All right. Also here with us in the studios is Dr. Khalid Aliu, who is Secretary General, Jamaatul Nasrul Islam, JNI. Dr. Khalid, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, viewers.
Okay.
All right, Kinsley, thank you. Let me also welcome, very close to me here, Ishak Sani, and he is the co-chair, Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Paul Gwaza is a senior research fellow at the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. He's also a barrister at law. Mr. Gwaza, thank you very much for finding time to join us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nigeria.
All right, gentlemen, just before we get into the nitty-gritty of our conversation, tell us something about what your experience has been over the years, particularly with regard to election cycles. What has been the experience of interfaith organizations with regard to the conduct of elections, the conduct of their members, and indeed the appreciation of the electoral process? Let's begin with Bishop Onuoha.
Well, thank you. The truth is that every Friday people troop to the mosque, and every Sunday people go to church. And the exciting thing is that people listen to their faith leaders. And that is why we take advantage of the opportunity God has given to us to share peaceful coexistence, preaching peace and reconciliation among people. And because people trust their faith leaders, it is an opportunity for us to share with them that election is not do or die affair. During the process of election, people should be ready to win. They should also be ready to lose.
What has been your experience? But say election should not be do or die. In 2003, the general elections were proclaimed do and die. And we have not seen violence abating because of our elections. That's the gravamen of my question.
Well, I think that's one of the greatest challenges we have. And until we begin as a people, begin to appreciate losers, the greatest challenge we have is that we do not know how to celebrate those who were not able to win election. And so people go to the polls ready to win, either even destroying the whole society in order to win. I also think that in a society where people come to elections in order to make money, then we're in trouble. When people come for service and they know that when you come and you want to serve and people say, no, don't serve us, you should go home and be happy.
Okay, let me also take the question from you and bring it to the doorsteps of Alhaji Ishak Sani. Kingsley asked a question. you're, of course, co-chair of Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace. What has been your experience, in terms of promoting or advocating peace during elections?
Well, I will just key into what my co-chair said. Our own responsibility in the mosque and the church is to talk to our people, to be reasonable according to the scripture. My own religion, my Quran tells me that I should tell my followers to toe the line of peace. And Islam itself comes from the word salam, which means peace.
Yes, but Kingsley again said, from what has happened during the past elections, from the kind of, violence and, things we've seen. Excuse me. Yes. Have your people listened, to your preachings for peace and all that?
Let me tell you one thing. It's not every Muslim that goes to mosque. It's not every Christian that goes to church. Again, we have a very serious problem in our hands. The problem of poverty. My prophet told me, that is the only prophet, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that poverty is next to infidelity. There is no amount of preaching that you do to a man who is hungry. When he goes out, he leaves the mosque, you have told him the truth, that he should not take money, he should not sell his conscience. But he leaves the mosque, there is nothing for him to eat, and the man comes around and gives him some money. So that is why the politicians themselves are happy. They don't even want an average Nigerian to have, what it takes to feed his family, without to feed his family, so that they can continuously, buy his conscience. Can you imagine somebody selling his voter's card for as less as 1,000 naira? For a man who is going to, be in power for 4 years. So he has sold his conscience, he has sold even the life of his children, the education of his children, the good roads that are supposed to be provided in his community, for a pittance. But that is the problem we have, the problem of poverty. The culture of poverty is very endemic in our country. And unless a solution is, is found to this, whatever you preach in the mosque, you are just talking to the deaf.
All right, Alhaji Ishaq, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Dr. Khalid, who is of the Jamaatul Nasr Islam, a faith-based organization. What has been your experience in the various election cycles that we've had in recent times, say in the last 20 years, which is, of course, the duration of the instant republic?
Well, you see, the problem of Nigeria and Nigerians is that of the complex psychology within the people and the absence of collaboration and intercooperation. The faith-based organizations themselves can't make it because man is a compartment of so many things. The social angle, the spiritual angle, the economic angle, the social angle. And until they are interwoven together, once you do your own part and the other segment is deficit, then you really have a problem. And until we are able, in a society, the academia, the security, the media, the politician himself, and the INEC, and all, until we have a kind of collaboration and cooperation, then we'll not be able to make it, because there are so many things bedeviling the process. And the experience over the years continue to repeat itself as we're talking. There's not much voter education. Voter education is indeed really very, very important. And that this elitist kind of approach to cities, the real voter, the real person who suffers in the country doesn't even know all these things. How have we been able to really step down all these values we're talking about to the common man in the society, for him even to know that my vote is my life, is my right, is the future of myself, my children, and is the future of this country. So we are just circumambulating in a kind of a vicious circle. And I think the government and all its agencies and the religious institutions and all the ones that I've mentioned, until we're able to synergy, come together and collaborate, then we'll still be having fallouts during elections. Yeah, now talking even now the display of the voters card itself. Now you find that at least we should have graduated to a level that being the giant of Africa, and I think having been experiencing these things, that there should be no rigors in terms of having to locate your name, to get your card, and you are sure, and even with your card, with your name, you are not sure whether your accreditation is going to be possible or otherwise. And there are really very issues. issues. Now you don't know. Going to the polling unit, you're not sure what the end result will be. Meaning, are there waywards and hooligans being paid by desperate politicians? Because in Nigeria, it's a desperation and it's a matter that I just have to make it and I don't take the other side of it. We don't play the game according to the rules. Elsewhere in the world is about trying to really offer service to the community and the society. Then allow the society and the community make its own choice based on your agenda, based on what you can provide. You could see during Obama, there's issues that have to do with tax, issues with education, issues with the subsidy on health and so on and so forth. Are you talking about even real issues that affect life in Nigerian politics?
Dr. Khalid, Dr. Lee, let's pause it for a while. You've raised the gaps, and these are the gaps that, both faith-based and interfaith-based organizations are trying to find, to address. So, Mr. Gwaza, every Nigerian, rich or poor, believes in one faith or the other. Either they go to church or they go to mosque, or they have a devoted place in their homes, to worship, whatever they believe in. So, in the course of your research, are these faith-based organizations, what is the magnitude of, the assignment they have, at hand?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Apart from the fact that we are considering what they will offer, we need to look at what are the potentials that are inherent in the faith-based organization or religious bodies generally, even within the context of election. Now, within the context of election, you have to look at the pre-election, the during election, and then the post-elections. From our experience in Nigeria, we know that faith-based organizations have come a long way, and they have actually improved our electoral, the conduct of elections generally. Now, if you look at the pre-elections period, virtually all institutions that are saddled with the conduct of elections, or even the politicians themselves, rely on faith-based organizations to drive the process. So, for instance, if you look at INEC, for instance, it relies on the faith-based organizations or religious bodies for mobilization of voters or electorates to go for the polls. Now, during the polls proper, they rely also on these faith-based organizations because, mark you, Nigeria has been marked as one of the country that is highly religious. So, in the churches and in the mosques, we discover that these values of conduct of elections, democratic values, are actually enhanced in the churches and in the mosques. That is by virtue of the researches we have conducted. We have equally discovered that if there is any problem with the conduct of elections, for instance, in the 2011 elections where there was a violent post-presidential elections in northern Nigeria, we discovered that most of the victims run to the faith-based organization, whether it is in the church or in the mosques. Now, having laid this foundation, we discovered that in 2015 proper, these faith-based organizations and religious bodies have moved into the field to mobilize people against electoral violence. So they have played a greater role in ensuring that the 2015 election is not only peaceful, that there is no violence. So you see organizations like the Kuka Center and the Onaikan Foundation and others like that, and the Sultan of Sokoto coming together to mobilize In fact, the peace accord is, you can rarely say that it is a faith-based driven organization. So faith-based organization, religious bodies have played critical role in ensuring the enhancement or the consolidation of democracy, peaceful election in Nigeria, and ensuring that the elections is not violent. So they have come a long way, and we're actually studying to see how they will improve the conduct of the 2019 elections.
All right, Paul Gwaza, thank you very much, but I still would like to stay with you in opening up another aspect of this conversation, and that is to say that in addition to what you have just said, there are some persons who argue that religious places, I should say places of worship, have sometimes been incubators of hate, particularly in the pre-election process. Don't vote for this candidate, he's not one of us. Vote for that candidate, he's one of us. What is your reaction?
Yeah, the truth of the matter is that religion play a critical role in democracy across the world. Whether you look at the United States, whether you look at any part of the world, religion is central to politics. In Nigeria, we know that people have gone to the church and the mosques to preach against other candidates or the order. But equally, basically about 90% of the activities in the churches and in the mosques have been used to enhance the values of credible elections, free and fair elections. Now, to address your question squarely as to whether people that goes to the mosques and to the churches, or even clergymen that use their pulpit to preach hate against individuals, I know that in most of these instances, Nigerians have deciphered the messages, have sieved in between the message, and have taken decision. Whether the preacher said otherwise, the issue is that Nigerians know what they are, what they stand for, and they go by it. The point is that it is wrong for the imams, the pastors, to use their pulpits to preach hate speech, but again, there is freedom of expression. And once they do that, their congregation, if you study very well, their congregation are not always happy with such expressions. But the totality of it all is that churches and mosques have been used consistently in recent times to enhance credible elections, to ensure that democracy is consolidated. Because if you look at our history, 1993, for instance, the churches were the safe havens, or the areas where Nigerians run to find succor when there was crisis after the annulment. So the churches and the mosques themselves know that if there is any violence or democracy is not enhanced, they are the ones that are going to bear the brunt of all the challenges. So they are ready. Recently, faith-based organizations which have participated actively have gone into processes, mobilization of electorates, sensitizing electorates on the importance of credible election, peaceful elections. I know that the co-chairman of Interfaith Dialogue will highlight on the events that took place yesterday, but I've been part of many activities of NIREC, for instance, where Dr. Khalid presented a paper, and even on ICON Foundation had done a lot in terms of ensuring that the elections, the 2019 elections...
Yeah, well, Claire, I mean, when you're saying, Paul Gwaza, it could have been worse without the intervention of the interfaith-based organizations. Yes, no doubt about that. But I think that it's important, Claire, if you don't mind, for Dr. Khalid to also respond to this, because it remains a lingering challenge for us in our electoral process that, again, to rephrase what I said with the question I posed, that places of worship have been incubators for hate dissemination, particularly against opponents of different faiths.
Well, but you'll quite agree with me that religious institutions or places of worship, I think without their role, there wouldn't have been these improvements that we get in terms of ushering governments and electing other persons into positions. But it is also admissible, and it is manifest, that yes, there are these fallouts. And in any kind of organization, any profession, you find, the problem of accidental pastors and imams. accidental pastors and imams that we have around. People who are not really people of learning. They have not really studied. They are not well grounded in theology. They have not really gone into the real training. You find that such people, there are people who are better go to their business shops than to be imams or pastors, really. And that people who, you don't even see any spirituality in them. But they are the prayer warriors, and they are the fortune givers. You get a success, and I saw you in a vision in my own dream that you'll make it. And don't take no for anything. These are people that faith-based organizations and are really trying to really stress in trying to really have them have a proper training of becoming a real pastor or a real imam.
Very, very serious issue you have just raised.
Yes,
and I also like Bishop Onoha, within the context of Kingsley's question of, places of worship becoming breeding centers for hate speech and violence and all of that. Has the religious bodies lost their neutrality? Because that is like Dr. Aliyu said, you find, politicians go there, receive blessings, they receive prophecies, oh, you are going to be the next, person, you must be the next person, I'm going to be the blessed. How do you respond to that?
I think Dr. Khalid brought it out clearly. When you have people that lack institutional backing, then you have a problem. I am a Methodist bishop. I belong to the structures of Bishops' Council. There are things I cannot say. And if I say it, I'm in trouble. I belong to the World Methodist body. And there are things, rules, ethics, that are ethics of conduct, things that organize and guide what I must say. And so a time has come when we should hold our religious leaders accountable for what they say or what they didn't say. When people mislead people, when you incite people, you are a criminal. When from what you say from your pulpit has put fire in a community, we should treat you as a criminal. And we've come to a point in which we should not allow people to go free when they create problem in the society because they think God has spoken to them. And I asked the question, God said to me, and God said to you, one God. That same God has told me that you are going to be president. And that same God told me this person is going to be president. What kind of God is that God that will send two messages? So it's creating problems. And so we should hold those people responsible when there is crisis. A society where everything goes and nobody is held responsible, accountable for their actions. You have 5,000 people listening to you, 10,000 people listening to you. You open your mouth and say things that will create problems.
But these are also members of, your faith. Is there any mechanism, for also checking them?
Definitely. There are mechanisms. I think part of the greatest problem we have is where you have preachers who are self-made preachers that lack institutional backing. We must find a way of addressing such lacuna. Every person is called by God. Every person is called by the holy mountain. And before you know it, there is crisis everywhere. We need to begin to build our society. Nigerian people know how to behave, know how to function. In this country, there was a time we voted Alhaji Abiola, who was a Muslim, and his counterpart was a Muslim. Nigerians didn't care because these people were credible Nigerians. They voted for them. It was Muslim took it. When did we get into this dividing country between Muslim, Christian, North and South? When did we get to this madness? So we need to find men and women that will build, not people who will disorganize the country.
All right, Lord Bishop, thank you very much. Let's bring in again Alhaji Ishaq Sani. What are your thoughts on this issue with regard to the role of persons described by Dr. Khalid as accidental preachers?
You see, I just want to key in again to my co-chair, maybe because we are always together, we think the same way. You see, the issue of making some people sacred cows is killing this country. The culture of impunity. Because you say you are an imam, you are a pastor, you are a reverend, does not mean that you should create confusion and anarchy in the society. When a man goes to his church or mosque and starts preaching hatred, and he goes cost-free, maybe because he has taken money from somebody, and then he has promised him that he's going to mobilize his members for him to win the election, and he goes about, talking all sorts of rubbish. And you see, the social media has provided a venue now for people to say whatever they want to say, and maybe NTA, if anybody says all this kind of rubbish, you are not going to broadcast it. But it goes to the social media. But the security agencies are there to take care of anybody. Like recently, some people are saying that the house of the Chief Justice of the nation, was surrounded by soldiers and all that kind of thing. The kind of punishment that should be meted to those people should be meted to any priest. He's a Nigerian. Everybody is a Nigerian. The fact that you are a priest, you are an imam, does not put you above the law. So this culture of impunity, something must be done about it. If one or two people are punished, others they'll be sensible. But now, people just believe that because they are imams or they are pastors, then they have the liberty to say all sorts of rubbish and nonsense and create anarchy in the society.
Alhaji Ishaq, thank you very much. Dr. Khalid, I'm wondering, is it a linear process? In other words, is it so straightforward and easy to apprehend and sanction even freelance preachers who are disseminating hate or canvassing their followers to vote for a particular candidate on the basis of religion against the other candidate? Is it so easy to say, okay, go and arrest them, apprehend them? Yes. I say freelance, yes.
It's really not easy. It's a really cumbersome situation.
Why?
And I think faith-based organizations are really trying. I tell you, it's a fallout, it's a reflection of the general society. Even there are accidental politicians also. Of course, accidental politicians. Most of them are what we have on ground. But elsewhere in the world, the way they play the game according to the rules, people who have something to offer to the society, and people who know it, and really they have had really a good past that they can build on, which the society and the community has really seen. I think if there's one headache that is bedeviling the religious institutions, is the issue of the freelance, by your expression, freelance.
Yours is accidental.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we have all these people. They tell you all sorts of rubbish. I told you to become an imam, you really have to be drilled. Really, your attitude, your decorum, your expression, and you are supposed to be an embodiment of directing to high standards. Therefore, coming back to this question, I think we are trying really our best that no such just roadside imams or roadside pastors could just come and begin to talk to people. But I think when the law exacts its force on all, because nobody is until everybody is treated by the law according to the expressions of the law. But do we have really the process within the judicial institutions and the enforcing agencies that could be able to do that?
Paul Gwaza,
yeah.
Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that they have said a lot about the law. I think there is an important place where social mobilization can play a critical role. If you look at this issue, it's not only a matter within the religious cycle only. The religious cycle is a breathing of what we are seeing in the political cycle. We know that the context of hate narrative that is taking place around the political cycle currently is what is actually encroaching into religious discourse. But again, we can do a lot by ensuring that our social institutions, the family, the community, and peer group, play a critical role in ensuring that we ensure that our political space generally is entrenched with love, is entrenched with tendencies that are not actually divisive. for instance, narrative against the other on the basis of religion or on the basis of ethnicity is because there's no social cohesion generally within the space. It's not only an expression within the religious cycle. So if we ensure as a nation that we continue on the processes of national integration, that is a national issue, that can equally be integrated within the religious cycle. But if in the political space, at the national level, we are not being able to successfully ensure national cohesion and integration, then you will discover that it will be expressed within the religious cycle, because religious leaders are not coming from the sky. They are not Oduduwas. They are people that we give birth to them, and they are product of the Nigerian society. So they're expressing themselves. You see their Nigerian has been expressed, within that cycle. So we must ensure that, Nigeria must ensure that it grabs the space, because increasingly the Nigerian space is taken over by other narratives that are peculiar to people. We must ensure that the Nigerian identity is actually spread. So when on our own cycle at the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, we ensure that this peace education is across. And I know.
Yes, we'll come to what you're doing. Let's just pause you for a while. Gentlemen, we want to take a short break. When we come back, we'll begin to look at what exactly, how are you educating, your members with regards to, of course, INEC has released guidelines for, next month's election. So how are you engaging your members? But that will be after the break. Join us again.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous, whether you do it for fun or for political gains. Real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA. Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria, and we're still live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, we have some tweets that have come in, and we'll quickly run through those tweets before we return to the point that Claire wanted the guests to address, namely how they are canvassing their followers. This is from Mike Ayankwo. He says, faith-based organizations are not supposed to campaign for anybody or party. Unfortunately, some of these faith-based organizations have fallen prey to the antics of politicians. They forget their briefs and openly canvass votes for candidates standing for elections. More worrisome is the obvious campaign by faith-based organizations of calumny, hate, and subterfuge.
Okay, this one is coming from Dele Jack Solomon, and he says, truth must be told. Only free and fair, credible election will lead to violence-free 2019 election. However, our religious leaders must ensure that they pass the message of peace to the youth in their various communities to ensure that no life is lost during or after the elections. He continues that the primary role of the faith-based organizations is to pray for a genuine and sustainable peace in Nigeria that could be achieved through organizing joint prayer meetings, sincere communal and individual prayers for our beloved country. But he adds, these prayers shouldn't be individual-based, but must have a national outlook.
Festus Akimboye, faith-based organizations in Nigeria have a role to play in next month's election, if only to guide us through a peaceful polling, which is one way we can have a prosperous nation. All faith-based organizations should be politically neutral and pray for free, fair, and peaceful elections.
Well, this is coming from Ife Chukwude, and he says faith-based should get the PVCs to vote. Faith without works is dead.
Law Alpha C, faith-based organizations should see themselves as partners in progress by ensuring that their members are sensitized.
And finally, Ashiru Mohammed tweets, faith-based organizations should preach to their followers the virtue of peaceful coexistence and the need to distance themselves from do-or-die politics. After all, in all contests, there must be a winner and a loser. No politician is worth dying for. We thank all of you. You have another one?
Yeah, there's another set here, but I'll just take, so many of them, but we'll just take this last one from Ibrahim Tudu. It says, the intensity of hate speech that comes from the pulpits is more than the political campaign rallies. Faith-based organizations must be responsible, patriotic, and civil in their preaching and in influencing the action of their followers.
Yes, Kesley, we must thank, who did you say?
That's Ibrahim Tudu.
Ibrahim Tudu. And of course, all of you, Ife Chukwude, Alpha C, Ashiru, Festus, Dele, and Mike Ayanko, for all your tweets. You've been consistent. We thank you for being our very favorite. All right, let's quickly take the last set of questions. Kesley, you want to...
That's right. Returning to Bishop Onwoha. Now, we know what the problem is. We know what our national experience has been. In barely 4 weeks, we'll have the first round in the 2019 general elections. What will the faith-based organizations be seeking to achieve and how?
We are out to achieve what we know how to do. We have the ears of our members, and our members believe in us. They listen to us. And that is why yesterday we brought together faith leaders from all across the country, Muslims and Christians, imams, pastors, preachers, intellectuals. And for the whole yesterday and day before yesterday, we engaged the actors, the key players, the security, the INEC, the politicians. And our primary purpose for that engagement in the past 2 days is to see how we, from our own faith angle and pulpits, will continue to engage the voters and the electorates and to make sure that people abide by the rules of engagement. And we know that in various mosques and churches, preachers will go out to begin to usher peace, preach peace. And without peace, there can be no election. Without peace, there can be no Nigeria. And we weep for those places where we are encountering insecurity. And during our discussions yesterday, we got reports from states like Kaduna, Zamfara, Benue, Sokoto, the places you have insecurity our people have visited. How can we ensure that we preach peace in those places where people are displaced, people are being killed every day? How can we as people of faith engage and ensuring that we partner with government and security agencies to address the pain and suffering of those people who, for no fault of theirs, have been displaced from their homes? And so that's what we are doing. During the past festive period, Christmas period, I watched preachers and leaders of various churches preaching and engaging leaders on how we can engage our members on how to preach peace. As a Methodist bishop, we heard from the leadership of our church, the prelate, what we should preach in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 days, so that members will know that you as a person has one vote. So your mother may decide not to vote who you want to vote. Respect your mother. Your wife may decide to vote for another candidate. That is her choice. That is freedom of expression. We should do that.
Okay, let's quickly. Dr. Aliyu, INEC, of course, has released guidelines. How are you engaging, members to, of course, comply?
Well, I think, well, kudos to our religious institutions, our pulpits, and our members. I think this kind of mobilization and voter education from our own pulpits, from our own imams and pastors, I think in a very serious momentum. And there are a lot of meetings of this interfaith, and all of them are talking about or stress the need for free, fair, and credible elections. And therefore, these are the ways we are engaging followers.
Okay,
Yes.
let me quickly pause you. Elijah Sani, quickly, of course, how are you also mobilizing them beyond talking and preaching peace? Complying with the guidelines, it's also one way of, avoiding violence during elections.
Yes, we are, engaging in a lot of peace advocacy visits. In fact, like my counterpart said, very recently we went around about 5 states who had hotbeds of violence. And in fact, I led a team to Kaduna, and in a place they call Kasua Mangani, we almost lost our lives because we met a mob. A traditional ruler was just kidnapped, and we didn't know what happened. And it's just by a stroke of good luck that we were not killed. We had to run into the bush and that kind of stuff. So even at the risk of our lives, we try to see what we can do because we don't have any other nation except this. So it's a continuous exercise between now and the election. We'll continue to mobilize the people and talk to them and let them know that we need peace during this election.
All right, thank you very much. Paul Gwaza, you talked about mobilization, and further mobilization. In addition to what the co-chair of the Interfaith Dialogue have indicated, what more would you like to see in the lead-up to the election, during and after the election?
Generally, what we, in terms of beyond mobilization that I've been emphasizing, just as you rightly noted, is the fact that there is need for preparation and prediction with regards to what will happen during the election and after the election. And I think INEC has done a lot of preparation. Just yesterday, the INEC chairman said how prepared they are. But again, on our part, we are engaging stakeholders. Most of our colleagues are researchers, are in the field, training people, engaging stakeholders across the country with respect to the election, preparation to the elections. On our own part, we equally, just like I had you engaging others, some of the panelists earlier with respect to, and one of the panelists talked about situation room. At the Institute, we have what we call the Early Warning and Early Response Center. What we do is that we have our colleagues across the field, and we collaborate with faith-based organizations. For instance, there is the Interfaith Mediation Center in Kaduna that have a very wide network of partners across the country. That provides us with information with respect to tendencies for violence after the elections or during the elections. And then what we do is that we write policy briefs to the relevant agencies of government.
We want to believe, Mr. Gwaza, that has been done for this election. All right. I'm sorry, I have to stop you at this point. We're almost done with the program. Paul Gwaza, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, Barrister at Law, we thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
And we also thank Alhaji Dr. Khalid Aliyu, Secretary General Jamaatul Nasri Islam, JNI. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. And we'd like to appreciate Alhaji Ishaq Sani, co-chair, Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace. Many thanks to you.
Thank you.
And Bishop Sunday Onwoha, co-chair, Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace. Many thanks to you.
Thank you, and God bless.
And we wish you all the best. All right. Next is sports, and that's coming from our sports desk.